the men that I know who that are successful, like they have money, they have good relationships with their spouses, they are good dads to their children. They, they leave something of impact in the world. That they also tend to be like completely okay with gay people, right? Like it doesn't bother them. They don't feel like they need to punch down, in other words, in order to feel good about themselves. Like they feel good about themselves because they're producing more and they're giving away more.
It's interesting you say that. A Bounce Back Generation podcast.
So what do you think the other type of male, and maybe they're still doing well, they have the podcast, they have their thing going on, but they are making those, it seems more of like a self-centered approach. If a kid is kind of looking to become a successful man and do some of those things, kind of follow in the footsteps, how do they manage that without kind of falling to that side of immaturity and, well, yeah, immaturity?
Yeah, I mean, the self-reflection. Uh, here's a really great example of that. Have you heard of the book, The 48 Laws of Power?
Hmm.
Yeah. Every guy I know under a certain age has read this book, right? And the 48 laws of power, almost all of them are about manipulation. How do you fool people so that you can hide, but you can pretend like you can hide from yourself. You can hide yourself from other people so they don't see your weakness, and then you can trick them into giving you power. That's what most of those laws are. And I'm sure I haven't read the book. I have to be really honest. I've only seen the 48 laws, and I know that he supposedly did a lot of research and everything, but it's basically the laws that you can find in the very old book called The Prince by Machiavelli. That's where Machiavellian comes from. And then also there's a little bit probably of The Art of War, which is a great book if you really want to understand like strategy. But those 48 laws of power are really about hiding yourself so that you can trick other people into giving you power instead of seeking it for real, right?
When I read that book, I read it because of, well, I guess any young man would probably read it. But the way I interpreted it for myself, or how I applied it for myself, was being able to recognize these 48 laws, and really not all of them, maybe like, five or six actually were relevant to me, but being able to see like, oh, like this person, knowingly or not, is trying to do this to me. It was almost, if you've watched Harry Potter, like the defense of
Yes.
dark arts, it helped me realize in areas that I've been naive and someone else was doing that to me and I was kind of falling into those traps. But I was reading that at the time that my wife and I were about to get married, and before I would try to use one of them, I would think, well, that's actually not if I want to have a real relationship with someone, that's probably not what I should be doing. But at the same time, I should be aware of some aspects. I shouldn't be naive to some aspects of human nature so I don't fall victim to it. And then I can catch myself when I'm being inauthentic or I'm trying to manipulate.
Right.
But I think maybe for, and I did start to read it because I was thinking, oh, I'll have these laws of power and I can climb the ladder and I can do whatever. But um, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
What?
Well, actually, I had mentioned this to a colleague of mine who is in this whole world of, I don't know, he has an app that helps people to get to know themselves by taking these tests. So he has a whole bunch of these like tests that you take, and it's on the app, and then the app sends you like little articles. So I was talking to him about this, and he sent me this article that he wrote called "How to Spot Manipulation Before It Strikes." He said basically, if you look at the 48 laws of power, just like you said, you could read it as a way to just protect yourself. And it does. I mean, protect yourself from being a victim of being manipulated by by people who would use those laws. But I've heard of like, rappers going to court with that book in their hands, or people, they'll have it on their desk to just intimidate people. Like, yeah, I know how to use these rules on you. And I think if you go through, it might be interesting to kind of go through them one by one and just say what it is. Like, is there an analog to it? Is there, like, if it says to do this, is there a different way of doing it that is actually real power? Because what those 48 laws that I see, they set you up to do is to get caught and then have the downfall. How many people do we know who have tried to exert their power and then done it in a way that is so inauthentic that they've been discovered and then laughed at, fallen from grace, lost everything? Because there are laws of power. There's definitely ways to hold power, but they have to be authentic. They have to be something that if you lost that thing, you have something else you can grab onto. That to me is like true power. If you really want to look at it.
Well, one of the first ones that came to mind, probably one that stuck with me the most, is I'm not sure which number, but it's never outshine the master.
Yes.
And
I think that's number one.
I felt like this one made a lot of sense because, well, in any job, in any relationship, in any dynamic between two people, I think the book kind of meant more like you're in a job, you're in the workplace, you're in the corporate, you don't want to outshine your boss, you don't want them to start resenting you because you're outshining them. Um, but the more I thought about it, the more it makes me think, okay, then maybe I should play small. Maybe I should kind of be in the shadows and kind of do what I can, but let me not be the best version of myself because someone else is going to get jealous or someone else is going to think whatever they think. And the more I kind of sat with that, the more I realized if you have a boss, if you have a mentor, if you have a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, dad, mom, and they love you and they want the best for you, they're going to want you to do better than them. And
Right.
if anything, for me, that law has kind of helped me see, okay, who in my life doesn't actually really want the best for me. But that has also put a responsibility on me to look at the relationships I have and say, to my kids, okay, like, I want you to be better than me. Or like, if I have, someone, my wife, like, I want you to be, not like I want you to be better than me, like in some, super self-martyrish way, but like, I want you to do well. And so that means we have to negotiate on how we're both going to get the best out of any circumstance that we're in. And sometimes that means you're going to take the lead. Sometimes that means I'm going to take the lead, but we're going to be working together. And so I want people around that want the best for me and allow me to flourish and grow. And I need to be able to do the same thing for other people. And those people who take that law to heart and say, like, you can't outshine the master, you have to be in your place, you have to stick to the hierarchy. Um, Maybe that's for a certain place in the world, but in my life, those are not dynamics I want to have.
Well, let's put it in the context of a business relationship. And I've supervised many people over my career. And I actually want to see people who can do better than me. I can't do everything. I'm not great at everything. So I want to see if somebody could come in and say, sorry, Jennifer, but you're not the best editor for a podcast, for example. I can do better, and let me show you what I can do. I would be amazed and impressed and say you're hired, right? There's a really famous story from back in the day when FedEx was just starting out. And FedEx had made all these big promises that, we're going to get it there overnight, guaranteed. And there was a FedEx, like a mid-level manager who had to deliver something. It was a very important document that needed to be delivered to some very important person. And the plane wasn't working, something like that happened. So he went on his own and took the credit card, I guess, for FedEx and rented, I think it was a helicopter to make sure that FedEx, this is like, corporate lore, made sure that FedEx package got to this very important client. And I think FedEx was very young at that stage. And it just became this really famous story. And wow, the guy could have been so wrong. And he could have had the CEO of FedEx and all the shareholders and everyone say, what the hell are you doing? How dare you? You took a package that cost $50 to send or whatever it costs and charged, $15,000 to get that helicopter. But it was the right thing to do. And it was the guy making a decision on his own. So did he outshine the master in doing that? Yeah, he took the matter in his own hands. He acted like a CEO for, a couple hours. But it was great, and he went on to have a great career, as far as I know, with FedEx. The thing is it's a lie. If you know that you're better at your boss in doing something, or you know that you're better at your spouse in doing something, you don't like shove them out of the way and say, let me do this because you suck at it or whatever. But you say, I honestly believe I can do this, and let me show you what I can do. Now, you're going to be up against maybe somebody who doesn't feel like they have a lot of personal power, and that might, okay, you're fired now because now I'm scared that you're going to take over my job. Now, of course, that happens.
I think this kind of is maybe where some of the art of war can come in. If you know you're better at somebody than something, like say your boss, for example, then I think you kind of have to frame it in a way that's one, gentle to what you perceive their maybe maturity level to be. You want to be conscious of how they take things and maybe their insecurity around power dynamics. I think it'd be foolish not to understand the person you're dealing with, but also bringing people along for the ride. Like, hey, I can do this better, and this is going to serve you really well too. Like, this is going to make you look good for your boss, and we can do this together. And I just want to do a good job, and I want to fulfill the role, and I want you to do good too, and we can all win from this.
The first rule of the law of power is don't outshine your master. And you said something really interesting, which is that really what you're doing, if you're following that, is you're catering to that person's insecurities. You're basically the law is basically saying, look at your boss's insecurities and say, instead of saying, let me help solve the problem of your, that gap that you have in what you can do, like, what I was saying, like, I'm not the best, podcast editor in the world, and I do the podcast edits, and somebody steps in and says I could do it. I could choose as a leader to be really insecure about that. No, I can do it. You're not good at it. Or they could lie to me and say, you're such a good podcast editor, and because I have some self-awareness, I'd be like, you're a liar, or you don't know what you're talking about. I'm never going to let you touch my podcast edits because you're probably worse than I am. I mean, what are you gaining from that? Where's the power in that? There's no power in that.
Get to hide from, or you fire the person because you just don't want to deal with the fact that maybe you have some insecurities and you are deficient in some areas.
Yes.
And I think maybe that's how I kind of used the law at first. It's like, okay, like if I'm able to do this and I'm dealing with someone who doesn't like to deal with those sorts of things or has those insecurities, then I might be just starting out in the world. Like, I might actually get fired if I try to speak up a little bit too much, or if I do a little too much, if I'm dealing with someone who isn't able to have those conversations. And I think maybe that's a more useful view of the law. Like, there is some sort of reality that you will run into people like that, and you can get fired if you, quote unquote, outshine the master. But I think even deeper than that, like, there are ways to approach it where you don't have to abide by that rule, and it can work for both of you.
Yeah. Well, if you interpret don't outshine the master as be polite, be kind, be a good person if you see that there's a deficiency in your master, your ruler, your CEO, whatever it is. Don't go around pointing it out. But that's like obvious stuff. Let me look at the next one. Or do you have another one that you remember?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, the next one is don't trust friends, use enemies. I think it's good to see how it's broken down with the intention behind it. Here we go. 8 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, summary and notes. Okay, never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. So be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly. Friends often conceal things in order to avoid conflict. This can be dangerous. Keep friends for friendship, but work with the skilled and competent. Whenever you can, bury the hatchet with an enemy and make a point of putting him in your service. Use enemies to define your cause more clearly to the public. Or it's better off to know who and where your opponents are than to not know where your real enemies lie. I mean, this is like The Godfather, right? Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. which is really great advice, I think, from The Godfather. I don't know if that's the same intention.
My first thought is just know who you're dealing with. Whether that's a friend or an enemy or family or whoever it is, have a reasonable idea of who they are and how they act. And if you're being honest, but you're not being, I guess, kind of coming back to naivety, if you're not being naive, but you're being honest and you're being true, then you're not going to have much room for someone to betray you. Because I think if you put all this faith in a friend or someone who's working with you and you're not doing your own due diligence or not covering your own steps, then that leaves a gap where someone else could take advantage if they wanted to. Say like if you had a business idea and you're telling your friend, one day the friend does the business idea. Well, if you were taking every step and you were doing everything you needed to do and you were squared away on what you were saying you were going to do, the friend wouldn't have room to come fill that gap. And you don't have lies behind you or you don't have inconsistencies behind you. You can kind of walk in front of anybody, talk to anybody, and you'll be square, you'll be solid.
So you have to know who your friends are first. Know which of the friend is a frenemy, because they do exist, for sure. Yeah, have you ever had a frenemy?
I think unknowingly, people that I kept around just because I was probably lonely, but weren't really working in my best interest. Yeah, especially when you have a social circle and someone's talking behind your back and all that. But yeah, I think I've realized those dynamics, and I think I've left most of those.
Thanks for listening. We hope you'll subscribe for weekly podcasts about building personal strength, mental resilience, and emotional balance. You can also find free tools, resources, and quizzes at bbgtv.org. That's bbgtv.org.